How long do you think that bush burned anyway?
It didn't burn at all, you numbskull. You're
Oh,
the one. You're the one that knows it didn't burn. How long
well,
did
it
it burn?
burned, but it burned, but the fire didn't do anything to it.
Yeah, the non-burning bush.
The non-burning up of things while it burned. Well, I mean, who can dwell in the everlasting burnings anyway?
No, check it
Okay,
out. He saw that thing burning from not burning from afar away. Maybe it took him a minute to get up there. Maybe he got up there right away. But hey, take off your shoes. This is holy ground. Hey, go into Egypt. Oh, blah blah blah. And then there's Aaron. So Aaron had been on his way as well and had seen that light. So that's a good question. How long did it burn? It burned long enough for Aaron and Moses to see it from different sides.
and it had to burn for a while to show that it didn't incinerate.
Yeah, exactly. Like, oh, it's I
That
hear it
which
crackling and stuff, but nothing's disintegrating. Yeah, exactly. Good point.
okay, so my understanding is that Jesus died on Friday and rose on Sunday. You disagree, right?
Yeah, 10-4, disagree.
Okay, so
Well, yeah,
is
so your
your
Friday, yeah,
friend
yeah,
I
because you
guess
have your, yeah, because your that Friday would be your Passover day, the 14th, and I'm saying Wednesday would have been the Passover day, the 14th. Yes, correct.
because
Go ahead.
obviously that's the correlated. We know that. We both agree there. Adventists would say something like the high Sabbath was because they were overlapping, but that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I'm letting you show me why you believe what you believe, and so I'm going to talk to you about it. But I'm not going to like try to argue with you too much because I want to consider what you're saying and all that. So I'm going to follow your lead. You just tell me where you want to go and what you want to say, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, sounds good. If I had presentation stuff and could do a PowerPoint and everything, it would be wonderful. But yeah, so I'm sorry to make you go through all these scriptures, but let's just start in. Well, I use Bible Hub, chapter Genesis 8 here. Oh, and you know what? Yeah, while you're, oh, do you have it up already? Goodness
Yeah.
gracious, what the hell? Dang, bro, is that KJV?
You want the King James?
Oh, well, I mean, I'll be
Yeah,
reading
I
it
can
out
do
of
that.
here.
It's
Yeah,
fine.
I don't want to. Yeah, I don't want to change my settings to a so that I can
You're
see. I
fine.
can read all that. That's good.
I can
As I
make it
zoom
bigger.
in.
I can make it bigger.
Oh, for the kids, I'm sure make it bigger. Knock yourself out. Um, I mean, I'm just looking at my book too at the same time and trying to. And where we're at here, verse 7. Let's see. No, we better not do that. Let's start with verse 4. And the ark rested in the 7th month on the 17th day of the month. It decreased till the 10th of the 10th month, and the first day of the month. Oh, let me see. Continuing until the 10th, verse 5. In the 10th month, on the first day of the month, were the tops of the mountains seen. So that's the 10th month, the first day. Verse 6 of chapter 8. And it came to pass at the end of 40 days. So when is that? It was the first of the 10th month. 40 days later is going to be the 11th of the 11th month. That Noah opened the window of the ark which he had made, and he sent forth a raven, which went forth to and fro until the waters were dried up from off the earth. So on 11:11, make a wish if you're superstitious. He sent forth a raven. Verse 8, he also sent forth a dove. Verse 9, the dove found no rest and came back. Verse 10, he stayed yet another 7 days. This is the 18th, I think, of the 11th month by now.
Yep.
When the dove
Well,
came
that's my
into him
count.
in the evening, yeah, and the olive, and verse 12, and he stayed yet another 7 days. So it's what, the 25th
Okay.
of the 11th month, set forth a dove, which did not return again unto him anymore. And it came to pass in the 601st year, in the first month, on the first day, that's Aviv 1, right? Nisan 1, month 1, day 1, right?
It's not Tishri.
No, that's 7.
Okay. Yeah,
Nisan is
I'm not arguing. I'm not.
No, it's fine. The modern is Nissan or Nissan. The If you Google Aviv, KJV, you'll find 3 references in the Old Testament. This is the month that you came out of, the month of the Abib. In the KJV, it's a BIB. This will be the first of your months. Ezra 7 that you like to use for your Daniel on the first day of the first month. That was when the final decree came out. And quite frankly, chronologically, we know he came out of the wilderness after 42 days, 40 days, 1 day with the devil. The 42nd day was the first day of the first month. So it wasn't just 483 years approximately later. It was exactly 480. But anyway, in verse 13 here, chapter 8, it's this. This is the first day of the first month. So let's go back to verse 7. And where were we at when he sent forth the raven? Because verse 5 was the 10th of the 10th month. And then verse 6 is the 11th of the 11th month. And here we go. He sent forth the raven on the 11th of the 11th month. How many days is that until the first of the year?
Frozen now.
It's
Sorry,
fine. It's fine.
1 second. I got frozen there. Okay, so let me get this right here. 40 days after the 10th month, the first day of the 10th month would be the 10th of the 11th, right? Be the
11th of the 11th month, correct?
wait. On the 17th day of the month, then it restarts the 10th month in the 10th month on the first day of the month. Let me highlight that. 40 days after that would be after 40 days.
Yeah, it would be the 11th day of the 11th month, 11/11.
Okay.
Yeah, Noah had a perfect
And then
30.
7 days, that's 18. Right? You were saying? So from the
Oh,
7 days
okay.
after the 18th, we know we had another 7 days in there, didn't we?
Right.
I missed, right here. Another 7 days right here. Sorry, my bad. So we have the 11th of the 11th, and then we have 7 more days. That's the 18th,
right,
and then 7 more days
to the
here,
25th.
the 25th.
Okay, but it doesn't matter because on the 13th, it gives us the final one. So this would actually be the 13th month. It's the first month.
Sorry. So go back to what you said before. I'm all caught up now.
You're fine. So the third verse, chapter 8, verse 13, verse 13. It's the first day of the first month. So from the 11/11, how long does it take to get to the end of 12 to start that first new year? From 11/11 would be right. That'll get you to 12, and then you have 30 days of that.
49.
Right. So here we go. The raven was sent forth on 11/11 in verse 7 until the waters were dried up from off the earth. Verse 13, the first day of the first month, the waters were dried up from off the earth. So this is our first Pentecost. This is the first that 50th day. That bird has been on the earth 50 days. That's Pentecost. That's cool. What Pentecost means. 50 days. It doesn't mean. It does mean that the capital P, Pentecost, means, when at the temple with the fire. But this would have been the first Pentecost. There was a raven on earth 50 days prior to Noah even opening up the door. And that's what I wanted to.
Cool.
Oh, my picture
seems to be a pattern of the feast days then.
Yeah, my picture is not changed to that raven picture I have. That's what I was explaining.
Oh,
that raven in my picture I made it from this raven. This raven was on Earth prior, and that picture is a raven talking to a fairy. She has wings. Okay. She's got a 16-inch waist. She's whatever, but this is, and he's telling her, you will always live. You don't need to worry as the flood is happening. And that's why, but I needed to bring that up to show you the value of the word Pentecost also, because that is definitely the Greek, the Pent 5 and Pentecost 50 days later. Now, this is directly from the feasts. This is the counting of the Omer to come up to that feast after Passover. I think you are familiar with the feasts and know that after Passover, we count 50 days, the counting of the Omer, and then that's what the Greek is Pentecost, but it's actually in the Hebrew Shavuot, which is the plural of weeks. It's Shavuot is the plural of weeks because you're counting weeks. When we count the Omer, if you've ever had fun doing the feast, boy, tell me, I tell you what, people, they're fun. They're fun to do. It's just a feast. It's, I don't know. We don't kill any lambs or anything. But it's always a Sunday. You're commanded to count three things. The Sabbaths up to 7. You're supposed to count up to 7 Sabbaths after Passover. You're supposed to count you're supposed to look for the morrow after that 7th Sabbath, and it's also supposed to equal after that 7th Sabbath and that morrow. It's supposed to equal 50 days. So you start when you count. Yeah. So when you count the Omer, you count three things: the days, the Sabbaths, and then you look for the morrow after the Sabbath. So it's
a Sunday
the name
Sabbath.
of it. Always, yes, it's the only commanded holy Sunday out of the year. Some other Sabbath, a high Sabbath, may randomly fall on a Sunday because they move. The weekly Sabbath, of course, always stays the same on Saturday, but there's one out of the year that's always going to be a Sunday. Because after you count that 7th Sabbath, it's Saturday. The morrow after that is always a Sunday. And that's it's a feast day, a one-day event celebrating the first fruits. That's kind of funny because we have a first fruits back in Passover. That's why I jumped down your throat at 1 Thessalonians 4:12 or something where it says Christ, the first fruits. And I'm always like, there's 2 first fruits. There's 2 first fruits. So, but anyway, so we need to understand Shavuot is the plural of week or 7. And this is important to people that love Daniel because unless they understand that he's actually saying Shavuot, 70 Shavuot are determined on your people, that's right away known as 70 years because there's only one Shavuot every year. And we know that to be true because they were only in captivity for 70 years. So that part of the prophecy is fulfilled. But moving on from
I think the word is, there is, what is it? I forget. I don't think it's Shavuot though, but it's like that.
That's all right.
I agree it correlates.
That's all right. Are you looking in the New Testament?
No, I'm thinking in Daniel when it says 77s, it's like the word there is for the sevens is a weird word. It's like a weird form of.
Go ahead.
It's like
go ahead and hit
that. It means sevens.
Yeah, put it on up there.
I don't have it. I have to look it up.
Well, I mean,
it doesn't matter. I agree with you basically. So it's just not technically. It doesn't technically say Shavuot, I don't think, but maybe it does. Are you claiming that? I agree with what you said. It's talking about once a year thing, counting them as years. I agree with that, so that's fine.
Yeah. And so the Shavuot. So it's known as the Feast of Weeks. This is in Leviticus in the English, in our KJV. The Feast of Weeks. You'll celebrate the Feast of Weeks, and then we know how to count the Omer. So let's. I don't know which one it is here. We're going to have to take a chance. Let's go to Acts 17. Let's try Acts 17 here.
One thing I want to ask you about this is, do you think? I don't think he's keeping Passover per se, but I think it's the same timing, like what you described here in Noah. Because doesn't it say that the first Passover is when they left Egypt? So do you think, like, I don't disagree with you that the pattern is there, but do you think he was thinking, oh, this is the Passover?
Oh, no. It's just a coincidence of 50 days. Pentecost. Don't get Pentecost and Passover mixed up. The raven would be the first Pentecost, simply because Pentecost means 50 days. It would not be the first Shavuot. That does mean weeks and
Okay,
stuff like that in
yeah,
a
that's what I meant.
definite. But yeah, it's for
The Feast of
definitely.
Weeks is like the end of the Passover, but the Passover thing is it doesn't exist yet, right? And then the Feast of Weeks is like from the end of that until Pentecost, right?
Yeah. In fact, the pattern. Let me try my camera here. It's probably going to show up on me.
Hey,
Yeah.
who's that?
Oh, sorry. Can you see that?
Zoom in
Let me
more.
see. Shows up on the TV.
Here, I can do. It's better. Let's see.
Oh, I see it. It's shaking and everything. Wow, that's funny.
There. What about it?
It's a 12-day. Passover is a 12-day feast.
Okay.
You would always see it as 7 or 8 days, because Passover is when you kill the lamb, and this is when you eat it. But way back here is when you choose it.
Right.
So if you're coming in here like Simon a little bit late, you're going to be carrying somebody else's cross. You still have to show up and you keep it up. But this is what we're talking about for the 7 days that are described as you don't have any leaven in your house. The 15th is an added Sabbath, and the 21st is an added Sabbath. And our
you
only
count the
discussion.
Sabbath. You add that Sabbath that falls in there is the one where you count 7 from there, right?
Yes, because it could be anywhere in here. And so
right, because it fluctuates. Right.
So if the weekly Sabbath fell on the 19th, you would have the 20th would be a Sunday. We know that because it's a Sabbath. And that would be your first fruits. And that is also day 1 of counting of the Omer, day 1 of the Feast of Weeks. Okay, no matter when it is, I mean, that no matter when that Sabbath is, the next day is always going to be the start of the Feast of Weeks. And so let's go to, I think, Acts 21. Doggone it, it might be 17 here. Let's go to Acts 21. Oh, you can take that. Go ahead.
But yeah, okay, it'll only be a second. I'll put it up on the screen though.
Yeah, I don't think it's Acts 21. All right. Well, we are looking at if you've ever done the feasts, they're fun and easy to do. I have looked for Paul doing the feasts and doing the Sabbath in Acts. And every other word, he's trying to get to Jerusalem for this feast or that feast. Every other word is he's got some money from the, I don't know, the Macedonians or somebody that he's got to take to Jerusalem, and people keep telling him, hey, you're going to die if you go up there. But he's going all throughout the country, and at one point it sounds like, hey, he stopped it here because he says the feast of Passover, and then it says after that, hey, he went here for 7 days. The next day we went here for a week. The next day we went here, and we're trying to get back to Jerusalem for the feast. It sounds like he's counting the Omer. It sounds like he's giving you enough numbers in there that he's counting the Omer. So looking at that on the 50th of those days that we're counting, and I can't find it in my notes here. Acts 21. It's probably Acts 17. He goes and visits some women on. I think it says on the
I
Sabbath.
see one thing here, and it says, let's see. It came to pass we've gotten from them. They launched. He came. Let me see. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I wasn't sure. I'm switching back and forth here. Now, when he had discovered Cyprus, the left hand sailed to Syria, landed at Tyre. The ship was unladen, her burden. Finding disciples, we tarried there 7 days, who said to Paul through the Spirit that he should not go up to Jerusalem. We accomplished those days, he departed, went our way, and they all brought on our way, the wives and children. Da, da, da. The next day, we were of Paul's company, departed, came to
Yeah, where are you at
Caesarea.
on that? Where are you at on that?
Verse 8 now. And
Of
then one
what,
of the
21?
7, the 7 days part was in verse 4. Then they
Gosh,
stayed
I
a
can't believe it's
day
that far. I can't believe it. Where does he meet the women
right
at the
after
place?
that.
Oh,
Verse,
good. Yeah, that worked out good.
let's see, maybe not the women. Let me see. I'm scrolling through this real quick. So see,
Oh, 21, he's in Jerusalem. Oh, my goodness.
and he went to Jerusalem. After those days, we took up our carriages and went up to Jerusalem. That's verse 15. Then we went to Caesarea. Manasseh of Cyprus, old disciples, they lodged with Manassas.
No, it's when he meets the women.
Manasseh. Let's see.
It's,
You want to go look at?
It's when he meets the women.
Then they were among the Gentiles to forsake Moses, saying that we circumcise our children. Let's see. You want to go to chapter 17? I don't see any women.
It's going to have to be. Yeah, I'm almost sure.
Okay, let's see. Okay, 3 Sabbath days, reasoned with them. Chapter 7, verse 2.
17.
The synagogue, where was a synagogue of the Jews, and Paul as his manner was sent with unto them on 3 Sabbath days.
Oh, good. That helps with
Reasoned
that,
with them in
the
this.
synagogue.
Then they reasoned with them about Jesus being the Messiah. Some of them believed and consorted with Paul and Silas. The Jews which believed not moved with envy. City is in an uproar. Assaulted at the house of Jason. Brought out to the
You shouldn't have to
people.
find this. I should be ready for this. This is.
They troubled the people. Let's see. It's okay.
Yeah, just where did it? Yeah, just hit up. Where did he meet the girls? At a place of prayer.
Like when they went to the river.
Yeah. Yes, by a river, a place of prayer by the river, I think.
Yeah, let me find that real quick. That's probably a couple more verses. Let's see.
Probably 13 with my luck, way back like 8 chapters. Stupid.
I want to say that's chapter 20 if I remember, but it seems like it's chapter 20. I'll search it real quick. Hold on. Okay. Somebody's helping me here. Hey, be separate. You came to a live show. Look at that. Is it Sabua? Yeah, Sabua. That's what the word I was looking up. That's the 7s in Daniel 9. Sabua, and it's translated in Daniel 10 and 11 as weeks. So let me see. Women by the river. That's how I remember it. That's a great Sabbath verse. 16:13. Okay. Let's look there.
Oh, for real?
So.
And they went and told unto the residue. Oh, that's Mark. You're
on the Sabbath, we went out of the city by a riverside where the prayer was wont to be made, and we sat down and spake unto the women which resorted thither. And a certain woman named Lydia, seller of purple, worshiped God. So, okay, go ahead. I'll follow your lead here.
You're fine. Which one? Where were you at?
The river thing is at 13. Verse 13 in chapter 16.
Verse 13 in chapter 16. You're good at directions. And on the Sabbath, can you hit that up in your interlinear and let's see what it says in the Greek.
Okay. Let's see. How do I do that again? I forget.
I do Bible Hub. I'm sorry I can't help you along those lines, but
I always use I usually don't use it. Well, actually, no, I do in here. I always forget how I get that though.
I don't know where you're at on that. I go to Bible Hub.
Oh, darn it. There we go. Let's see. 16 verse 13. It's hard to read. Okay. This one right here.
Oh, yeah, good.
Dang it.
Well, I can't read all that.
I'm going to do the Bible up just because I like the way it presents it here. I'm not used to presenting that on here. Give me a second.
Oh, you're fine. What's his name?
4521. Okay, it's on the screen good here, but let's see. Sabaton. Is that showing up?
Yeah, real dinky like.
Yeah, it's really dinky. Hold on. Let's try this. Yeah. Okay. 4521. Make it bigger. Okay, right there. You see it now?
Yeah, clear as mud. Should have gone to Bible Hub. Where does it? Which
there.
one you look?
4521. Right there. Bang. Same one as E. Z. Okay. There you have it. You see it? Or day of weekly repose from secular avocations. Do you want me to pull it up on the other so it brings up the parallel passages and stuff? Is that what you're looking for?
No. The interlinear it gives you the word by word, and then underneath it'll tell you if it's singular or plural.
Okay.
This is just telling you the word that it's coming from.
Okay, 616. 13. One sec, buddy.
I hear you typing and can't come
in. Okay. Ookie dookie. I'm a Bible scholar. A Catholic was accusing me of speaking past my knowledge earlier. And they were right, man. I'm guilty. Okay, there you go.
Oh, goodness gracious. Look at you. Yeah, see that Sabbaths? Plural. And look at and actually read it in the Greek. On the then day of the Sabbaths. That's week to me. This is Shavuot. And if you're too far away from Jerusalem, you're supposed to do exactly like Paul did. You go down to a river where the women had a place to pray, and you talk about the good Lord. Boy, so sorry about that. The reason I do that is because when we're looking at these scriptures that I gave you, we're going to have to know.
Everybody's showing up now. You're in trouble now. All the Adventists are showing up.
I should have changed my picture, doggone it. Well,
okay, wait. So let me zoom in on what your point is here. So you were saying count the Sabbaths, but don't you think it's when you count this weekly Sabbaths once the weekly Sabbath falls in the Feast of Weeks? Isn't that right? Or is that wrong, according to you?
Right, but so that first day, there aren't any already. So maybe it's been 3 Sabbaths and 3 days. So in the counting of the Omer, I'll say it's been 3 days since the third Sabbath for a total of 24 days. The morrow is weeks away. But on the first day, you would say on that day when you say he arose on that Sunday, and I would say the day before on the Sabbath, that Sunday is the first day of the counting of the Omer, and you would say that it's been 0 Sabbaths and only 1 day for the counting of the Omer. Because you're going to, on the 7th day, it'll be 1 Sabbath. You'll say it's been 1 Sabbath and 7 days. So yes, when Mary go to the tomb along with Mary, that it's definitely
they're all married. They're all Moses's sister, right?
Oh my goodness gracious! There's like 5 of them. There's like 5 of them at the cross. It's like
Jesus' mother was Moses's sister. I think I heard that somewhere.
Yeah, and they don't even say her name. They say, "Oh, Mary this, Mary that, Mary this," and then the mother of Jesus. And it's like, well, wait a minute, her name's Mary. There's like 10 of them there. Oh, anyway,
Okay, so tell me where I'm wrong here because I'm having trouble visualizing the difference. So my understanding is no matter what days of the week, the Feast of Weeks and the with the Passover and then the it seems to me um when you count the 7 sevens, no matter what it falls on, you wait for the weekly Sabbath wherever it falls, and that's the first Sabbath, and you count 7, and then so that's what makes it always land on a Sunday or a day after the weekly Sabbath. Is that wrong?
you will always start on a Sunday, so to speak, because yeah, yes, I think you said that correctly. It always ends on a Sunday, but it always has to start on a Sunday because it's after that weekly Sabbath that falls somewhere within the Feast of
That's the
Unleavened Bread.
first Sabbath, and then you'll always have 49 days because you'll do weeks, literal 7-day weeks. But
Right.
when you count that first Sabbath.
When you count that first Sabbath, it will be 7 days after. Yes, that will be 7 days later than.
From that first weekly Sabbath, you'll have 7 sets of 7, and then it's the next day.
Yeah.
Is Pentecost, right?
Yeah. So you'll always start on a Saturday, a Sunday, as day one. It won't be day zero. So you'll always start on a Sunday and you'll always end on a Sunday. But only that second Sunday is holy. The first one is it's after a weekly Sabbath, and it's not an added Sabbath. It's just a regular day. The barley sheaf wave offering. You present your barley to. I mean, you don't got to be a farmer. You could be Tevye in Fiddler on the Roof, with a milk cow. But you would go to Jerusalem and you'd find some barley, probably people selling it, and you would bring it up to the priest and he would wave it. And that's it. That's the end of what you
Okay.
need to do for the feast.
Okay. So show your chart again, because I think that'll help. So when you were saying, let me make it bigger. So I want to understand you better here. There we go. Whoa, I'm a pasty white devil. Okay, that's a washed out. Okay, so um, you're saying, so I guess Adventist would say it happened to be that the first fruits landed on a Sunday, and you're saying no.
Oh, no, no, no. I'm kind of agreeing with you. If that Sunday, yeah, no matter if it's a Wednesday crucifixion or a Friday crucifixion, the first the Sabbath within that week that the 15th starts is going to be that Sabbath for you and me. And so the next day we'll start the first fruits, and the counting of the Omer. And as Acts, my gosh, where did we finally end up? 16:13 or something? As Acts 16:13 shows, and I was going to take you to the Leviticus to show you as well. It's called weeks and or Sabbaths. So this kind of introduces us into a point where we both agree, whether it was a Wednesday crucifixion, Friday crucifixion, when Mary, what is it? It's going to have to be Matthew.
So Jesus being the first fruits, but you don't think he rose on the day that's the first fruits. Is that right then? I'm trying to make
Yeah,
sense of
I
that.
would just say, yeah, it's going to be you and I agree, it's definitely going to be the first fruits that day. You would say he raised that day. I would say the day before, but we're both on target for it's in the middle of that Passover week.
Oh, because that would count in those from that Sabbath in the Passover or
Right.
the Sabbath
Yeah.
that's not necessarily a weekly Sabbath. Because your claim is that I guess the Adventist view would say the Sabbath of the feast that's an added Sabbath fell on the actual weekly Sabbath. You don't think that wouldn't work with what you're saying, obviously. And so you're saying that those
Correct.
did not correlate. But
Right.
aren't
But
you
don't get
saying and you're saying the first fruits would count on because you're saying the Sabbath of the Passover, I guess. Is that right? Sabbath of the feast there in the Passover to the feast of the wave sheaf offering. You're saying
Oh, that's
that
not a
happened
Sabbath.
on what, Wednesday or Thursday?
Yeah, and so the only difference is we have, yeah, so that first fruit Sunday is not a Sabbath, so you're right. We are, you say the weekly Sabbath was also a high Sabbath. I say there was the weekly Sabbath and then 2 days earlier, a high Sabbath.
Right, right.
Yeah,
And
okay.
so what if that's the case, that the Sabbath of the feast that fell before the weekly Sabbath, what days would be the first fruit then in that on
Oh,
that?
that's my point. Yeah, that's my point. It's still the same because
Okay.
a Wednesday crucifixion is a Sabbath a couple days later, and then that next day would be the first fruits. Yes.
The first fruits would still be the day after the weekly Sabbath that falls within that festival, right?
Correct. Whether it's a
Okay.
Wednesday, Tuesday, crucifixion, let's see, Monday, let's see, Sunday, I don't know, because it might go backwards after that. But yeah, we're both working on the same weekly Sabbath. We're just disagreeing on the high Sabbath. Good point.
Okay. So
And so
so
I might have, yeah, so I might have confused you on that first fruits. I guess I'm working backwards. To show you that the first fruits, excuse me, to show you that Shavuot, Pentecost, the 50 days, the counting of the Omer, that all is definitely Sunday. And the uh, when the women, oh, it's got to be Matthew. Let's just go to Matthew
okay.
28:1. And quite frankly, you might want to just read this thing in the English and explain to me how you don't get that he was raised on the Sabbath. But anyway, verse 28:1, in the end of the Sabbath, as it began, this is in the KJV English, in the end of the Sabbath, as it began to dawn toward the first day of the week, came Mary Magdalene and the other Mary to see the sepulchre. In the Greek,
I
oh,
have the Greek's on the screen. It's after the Sabbath, it being dawn toward the first day of the week. Yeah.
right. See that week? It's plural.
Okay.
So anyway, yeah, but let me read it again. After then the Sabbaths, plural. So that works for you if the weekly Sabbath and the high Sabbath were the day before. This works for me if the weekly Sabbath was the day before and the high Sabbath was on Wednesday, okay, because it's after then the Sabbaths. It works for both of us. It being dawn, and just read it. You don't look at those added words. Being dawn toward first of weeks. That's a plural. That's not a Sabbath. Look at that, Sabbatone. That's
Mhm.
plural, and that N means noun, gender neutral, plural. So I'm just trying to explain to you that this is definitely Sunday, and it's the first day of the
Yeah.
the feast of priest first. Yeah.
Let me see if I can just get the regular KJV here. I should be able to, right? See.
Oh yeah, right up.
It says at the end of the Sabbath, it began to dawn towards the first day of the week. Wouldn't
So
that
that would
mean
be like,
so right now we're talking, did Jesus raise before the first day of the week? Well, so my understanding would be something like on a biblical calendar, the day after the Sabbath was, so this is the daybreak of the day after the Sabbath. Oh, let me just throw. Do you want to say some more about that first, Mike? Sorry, go ahead.
no. You were hitting the exact confusion I wanted you to hit on when
Okay.
is this. It sounds like in the end of the Sabbath. That's just prior to sundown and or just right after, and there they are, and he's gone. There's no reason to mention that Sabbath. It had
Oh,
been a while since the Sabbath ended, and the sun was coming up in the morning. This makes it sound. I mean, I don't. This
oh,
is not
okay. I
my
hear you.
case. Yeah,
Okay.
this is
Well, let
not
me
my
show you.
case.
I have a slide here. This is my understanding. this is helpful, I think. Right. So up above here is the Roman week, or the week we go by, right? Midnight to midnight. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And the Sabbath, we agree, obviously, this is the biblical week. Right? So my understanding would be, is what it's saying is, she shows up, right? Can you see my arrow on this thing?
Yeah.
You probably can. Okay, good. So my understanding would be that this is talking about right here as the sun is coming up. And so you could say, let's see.
Well, I think you're on the wrong day.
I have
You're showing
the
up.
wrong spot, right? This should be here, I guess. I mean, that should be
I'm
there.
not sure. I was watching your cursor, not that pink thing.
That's the resurrect. When did he raise? I would say he rose somewhere in this period here. See where Sunday is? From this verse alone, and I have it here on the screen. The first day of the week when it was yet dark is another verse, right?
Yeah.
So it says the first day of the week when it was yet dark, Mary came to the sepulcher in John 20. So my understanding would be she's showing up right here when the sun was coming up, which would be our Sunday. And so this verse by itself just says Jesus was already risen before she shows up right at the daybreak portion right here on the first day of the week. So from this verse, you can't say it's possible that Jesus rose anytime before that. He was already risen.
But if the dawn, right?
So that could be on Saturday. And this could be the dark portion. It doesn't say when, it just says he was already risen. So I would never use this verse to say he rose on Sunday to prove it. But it does seem that, so technically you're right. Like you could say, sorry, let me zoom in. You know what I'm saying? He was already risen. I would argue sometime in here, in this dark portion, obviously. Otherwise he wouldn't qualify for 3 days. That would be on the third day. So it would have to be, on my view, it would have to be sometime after right here, the edges, sometime in the dark portion of the first day of the week, which ends at sundown on Saturday, right here. There's Saturday, but here's the biblical Sabbath, is the blue, sundown to sundown. So obviously, from my view, I would have to say according to this verse, he was already risen before the sun came up, which is on technically the day after the Sabbath, which began at sundown on Saturday.
Right, but
so
you have
somewhere in here, Jesus rose. He was already risen. Mary shows up right here. Do you want to make any comments or make any? What would you say?
The pink you've got in that blue. When you push it way off to the right, still in the blue, you're speaking about Mark chapter 28:1 in the end of the Sabbath as it began to dawn toward the first day of the week.
Right. Already risen.
Yeah, I think we read that in the Greek anyway, and it's a little bit different. But that dawn, the new day will dawn way at the far left side of that blue. The dawn of the daytime part, right? Well, this is kind of hard to explain.
You're saying that it's not a sunrise, it's a sundown?
I'm saying it could be in this case, if you just read the English, but we already read the Greek and we know whatever. It's a little bit different. It's the Feast of First Fruits is just what they're trying to make clear about it. Okay. But yeah, if another verse says John says while it was yet still dark, you're almost going to be forced to say the dawn of the first day of the week meant that the stars were starting to come out as they are right now for my Sabbath to start. Only that Sabbath had ended. But that's that of course is that's just 28:1. I just wanted to make sure you knew that at the resurrection those Sabbaths are plural.
Okay, so you're saying it began to dawn toward the first day of the week means the beginning of the 24-hour period, which is at sundown. That's your argument.
That is an added I would throw in tonight. This is not my study tonight. Because the Greek is so different, I wouldn't hang my hat on this. I'm just saying, isn't it funny as you read this? It almost, as anybody that knows just a little bit of it, how the days start, they would be led to believe, wow, I kind of see what's going on here. But yeah, the Greek.
Yeah, so let's look at this word because this I never even really thought about this, but I've always just kind of understand it. Well, it's talking about the daybreak part of the day, but technically the 24-hour period, that's the 24-hour day after the Sabbath day ends, starts at sundown, not sunrise. But the way this sounds is like the first day starts at sundown, not sun up. So how are they constructing this? And so
Yeah,
let's
it
just
doesn't
look
say
at that.
as it began. Yeah, it doesn't
Let's see what this
necessarily
word
say
means.
as it began. Yeah, it doesn't say as it began to dawn. It says as it began to dawn toward the first day of the week. It's like, oh, you're throwing a little wrench in my head. I need to reevaluate what I'm reading here. But yeah,
Yeah, well, it's like, well, it says the Sabbath day has ended, right? So where's the
and that
emphasis?
first
It's like,
word in the end. Yeah, it's like,
right
wow, right away. As soon as it ended, they're there. That's really what it sounds like.
after then the Sabbath, it being dawn toward the first day of the week. Okay, what was the other verse that was parallel to this? Mark, what?
Oh,
You wanted to
Mark,
look at that?
yeah, I've got all four of them.
John
Uh,
20 was one too. Let's look at that too. Let's see how it says it there.
15, towards the end of 15, Mark is towards the end of 15.
Okay.
John, I think you said was 20 or something.
Here in John 20, it says, now the first day of the week. That's not very helpful, really. That could be either. Although it says, comes Mary during the dark portion.
And the Greek in John chapter 20, verse 1 is plural, the first day of the weeks. Now, the first day of the Sabbaths, plural. So that's another like, hey, it's definitely Sunday. It just verifies both of our positions that it's the day of first fruits in addition to being a Sunday. But isn't Sunday the new Sabbath now? So maybe we should be reading this a little bit different.
Sorry, I had a
No, you're fine.
bugging me. Okay, so say that again.
So John chapter 20, verse 1, the first day of the weeks, that in the Greek, week, Sabbath, is plural. Now, the first day of the Sabbaths. So that's just the exact same thing that we were talking about earlier. This is definitely a Sunday. It's definitely a Sunday.
Okay. Yeah, I'll have to look into some of this more, but I don't want to try to do it right now because I will look stupid. So, it seems like it's saying I think it's necessitates that it's talking about the day portion in Matthew. What was the other one? But I'm not sure. I'll look into it more. But where else do you want to go?
It's not part of that was just like an added, like,
Okay.
yay. But no,
Okay.
I think we were just as we were in John 20, but I've also got Matthew, Mark, and Luke references here.
Okay.
Since we're in John 20, I can't see it. Are you in?
It's in John 20.
Yeah, John 20. Can you back up just a smidgen to 1931? And in the KJV, John 19:31, the Jews, therefore, because it was the preparation that the body should not remain upon the cross on the Sabbath day, for that Sabbath day was a high day, besought Pilate that their legs might be broken and that they might be taken away. Now, this is the legs breaking, so this is definitely before sundown. But yeah, in the Greek, these are singular. Each one of these Sabbaths is singular. They had to get him off the cross on a singular Sabbath day. For that singular Sabbath was a high day. And then afterwards, you get both Sabbaths or multiple Sabbaths or weeks. So why do we have two singles represent, meaning one day? To you, it's it's going to be Friday, the preparation day. Why would it is not doubled? Okay, so that would be my my John arguments.
So it's using a different term for Sabbath singular here, and as opposed to okay.
And I think we went over the Matthew. Let's see, Matthew. Yeah, let's go ahead and go to Matthew 27. 62-ish.
Okay.
Well, we can actually back up a smidgen just for verse 60, and laid it on a new tomb which he had hewn out of the rock, and he rolled a great stone to the door of the sepulchre and departed. 61, and there was Mary Magdalene and the other Mary sitting over against the sepulchre. 62, now the next day that followed the day of the preparation. What the heck is that? Have you ever heard a Jew, have you ever heard a Seventh-day Adventist say, oh, I can't wait until the day after the preparation day?
Yeah. Not say it that way.
I can't wait till the Sabbath. Who in their, what layman seminary person would ever say, no, the next day that followed the day of the preparation, okay, that's the Sabbath. Okay, we all
You think
know
that
that.
suggests that it was talking about a weekly Sabbath and then preparation day for the regular Sabbath? Is that what you're saying?
Oh, yes. This is why it has to be on a Wednesday. There has to be a day in between the high Sabbath. So here they are in verse 61 at the sepulchre. This can be the preparation day, right? It can be right before sundown, like we were talking. It could be right after sundown, like we were talking. We don't know how long they were there, whatever. But these words.
Well,
now
they're there on the preparation day. It can't be the day he was crucified, can it? Well, I guess it would be, because if they're burying him as it dawns on the Sabbath.
Right. Still, he has to be in the grave on preparation day. He has to be in the grave. Right. And you're just saying that's a Friday, and I'm just saying it's a Wednesday.
Okay.
But no matter which one of us it is, these words in verse 62, now the next day that followed the day of the preparation, that's either my high Sabbath or your high Sabbath and weekly Sabbath. What are these priests doing and Pharisees going to Pilate? Why are they going to Pilate?
They would be breaking the Sabbath, wouldn't they? Right?
Hell yeah. Oh, pardon my French. Sorry about that.
Well, I mean, if they're willing to kill the Messiah.
Oh yeah, let's get rid of them.
Right? I mean, but yeah, right. You're saying these guys wouldn't break the Sabbath. Well, they might do it to kill Jesus. But I hear
it's
you.
a definite consideration. The day before, they wouldn't go into Pilate's judgment hall lest they be defiled. And here they are on a high Sabbath and or a weekly Sabbath, talking to Pilate. But if it's just verse 57, it does talk about Joseph.
The greater crime would be wanting to murder Jesus, but yeah. Or, plotting to molest his body or whatever.
Or maybe they just put a comma somewhere wrong.
No, the KJV punctuation is certainly inspired, by the way.
So here's Mary Magdalene and Mary sitting over against the sepulchre, and they say, now the next day that followed, comma, the next day that followed the Sabbath, these girls are there sitting over against the sepulchre on the Sabbath. Other women have gone to get spices on the Sabbath? No. So now we read 62. Now the next day that followed, comma, the day of the preparation. Oh, that makes sense. The chief priests and Pharisees came to him on a Friday after a Wednesday crucifixion, a Thursday high Sabbath. They come to him on Friday and say, hey, let's secure the tomb. He said he's going to be raised on the third day. Let's secure it against the third day. That's the only way that this can work. But I know you're not going to believe me on that, and other people will say that the chief priests and Pharisees did go to Pilate on the Sabbath. But that is my...
Yeah, but that wouldn't be the case on your view.
Right, and that's what I wanted to point out with Matthew. I think we went through John. Mark would be next.
Just so I catalog this so I can refer back to it if I want to try to, respond or whatever, or whatever. Just go back through it and then make any kind of points later. On this verse, your point is right here is that it's less difficult if we have this added. Or we have two Sabbaths, and that way they're not actually on the Sabbath, breaking the Sabbath, which is something they're not likely to do, being Pharisees, right? That's the idea.
Yeah, 10:4.
Okay. What's next?
Mark 14, 15-ish, 14, 15. Where are we at here? Mark? 1547. Oh, that's the very end of chapter 15. So yeah.
Okie dokie. If anybody out there thinks they have answers to Mike's arguments, you can join
Oh,
me later. But I'm letting him present his case as best we can and consider his point of view. So that's what we're doing here. So let's just give him the due diligence of hearing out what he has to say, and not just saying he's wrong. Okay, where do you want to go here? 47. It's on the screen.
oh yeah. 47 was my, let's see, Mark 47 to the end. Mary and Mary, they beheld where he was laid. Would that be my only point for 47? But I do want to back up to like 40, because this is also going to be the women. Verse 40 of that chapter 15, Mark. There were also women looking on afar off, among Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James the Less, and Joseph, and Salome, who also, verse 41, followed him and ministered unto him, other women, Jerusalem. And now, verse 42, and now when the even was come, because it was the preparation, that is the day before the Sabbath. This verse 42 is singular Sabbath as well.
I don't know enough about the Greek to say much about that. It looks like it's the same form as the plural, but it has pro added to it, and I don't know what that means. So, but in the English, it's certainly singular, and it is different than Sabbaton, which you're saying is plural, but I don't know enough about it to comment. So, you're saying it seems to be a singular. It's a singular. I'll just take your word for it. It seems reasonable.
Yeah, in fact, it's a made-up word. That pro Sabbaton. It's a made-up word from the Greek, just meaning pre, like before Sabbath. Yeah, it's just a made-up word. It's like our.
It has a prefix added in the Greek construction or whatever it looks like.
Yeah, and even though it's Sabbaton, where are we at here? How come yours doesn't have? I showed that was singular. I don't see. Huh.
It looks like it's spelled the same as the plural, but it doesn't have that line over the whatever. But it does look the same with pro added to the same construction. But I don't know. I don't know if that matters. They put it as singular in the English, so it's not the same thing as any particular other one per se. But that's why I say I don't know much about. I can't say much to that. But other than it seems possible that it's a singular, it's not the same thing as the plural. So I'll have to look into that or ask somebody who can help me.
Oh yeah, you're fine. Where are we at here? Mary beheld where and when.
I'm wondering is that it, man? Is that all you got?
Me?
Just messing with you.
Oh, it's all right. No, we're just finish up Mark here and then a little bit of Luke. I think we already did John.
Okay.
Yeah, so that verse 16 in Mark here, verse 16:1, that Sabbath is singular. Okay, I'm gonna.
Okay, I see it.
Let me.
Sabbath 2.
Yeah, let me. I think
having passed the Sabbath, Mary, Magdalene, and Mary, the mother of James, and Salome bought spices that they might anoint the body.
Yes, that Sabbath is singular. Where are we at here? Past Sabbath. Yeah, that Sabbath is singular. But look at no. Scroll back up to the beginning of the one. Yeah, right there. That Sabbath is singular, and having passed the Sabbath, Mary.
I got you. You're saying the Sabbath is over, and then they bought spices. That's not possible if it's the weekly Sabbath because it's still dark on my view, right? Something like that.
Somewhat correct.
So there had to be a Sabbath in there that ended where they could then buy spices after that before they went to the tomb. But on my view, it's still sundown after the Sabbath.
Yeah. Yes.
Right?
So we have a single Sabbath. This must mean the Wednesday high Sabbath. And when the Sabbath was passed, that high Sabbath, these girls had bought. That's it's, but in the Greek, it's actually present tense, bought, whatever. But yes, it's after the Sabbath. It's after one of the Sabbaths, and it can't be yours. It's got to be the Wednesday.
So
Uh,
my first thought on that is I don't think you can hang your hat on it. I definitely think that's a good. You can argue that way. I don't know if that demands that. I would say
no, that's fine. But look at. I
there's
would.
two ways you could read it. They obviously are going to the sepulcher. They're going to Jesus' grave certainly after the Sabbath. That's what I would say. And then
Right, but
when
look at
they
verse
bought
two.
they had bought the spices past tense in concept anyway. Like I don't think it demands that they are buying it after the Sabbath had passed necessarily. It is what they bought spices and they're going to the grave after the Sabbath. But I'm not sure that you can say it demands that they bought them after the Sabbath was over necessarily. But it's a good argument in a sense. It seems that way. That's again, I've looked at this one before and it seems that it's just saying that it's possible that it's spices they bought. It doesn't say when. In other words, it's saying spices they had bought in some point. I don't think you have to say they bought it after the Sabbath necessarily. Okay. It seems that way for sure. I get that. I'm just not sure it demands that, but I'll have to look into it more.
No, that's fine.
I get the point.
Yeah, but let's just make sure verse 2. So, verse 1, and when the Sabbath was passed, and then verse 2, and very early in the morning on the first day of the week. Okay, what? You're telling me twice? And when the Sabbath was passed, and very early in the morning on the first day of the week. I don't know. So anyway, that's I think that's Mark 1542. Did I go over that? And now even
Do that right before this. So let me read it in the interlinear and then you make your point one more time. Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James, and Salome bought spices that having come they might anoint Jesus. And having the Sabbath having passed, Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James, and Salome bought spices that having they bought spices that they might come anoint his body, basically, right?
Yeah.
And so your argument is that look, the Sabbath ended, then they bought spices, then they went to anoint Jesus with the spices they bought.
Yeah.
And I'm going, well, and then I'm kind of saying, I'm not sure because this is interlinear English, so it's out of order, right? Because they're different languages. But I'm saying something like, seems like you could say, it's basically like they went after the Sabbath ended to Jesus' tomb, and they went to anoint his body with spices they had bought.
Yeah, easily. Yeah.
So it seems like I'm not sure that it seems like both are possible, but I don't know.
Right. I'm with you, brother. My only point is it's a singular Sabbath. That's our only sticking point.
Okay.
So
Gotcha.
yeah, that's all. Yeah, we'll move on to. We'll try to get through this real quick. I tell you what, I appreciate you doing this, friend. I can't. There's no. What am I going to do? Point it. I can't do a PowerPoint. Whatever. Anyway, so Luke, we're
Well,
looking
I have
at.
to. I owe you.
I don't know what for, but whatever.
I would be a dirtbag if I didn't. Should do this anyway. You're my friend. Okay, what's next?
Luke 23-ish.
Luke 23-ish. Okay. I'll be right back. I gotta hit the. I gotta go visit. I gotta go visit my friend who's made of porcelain. No, see, Luke, what?
Oh, 23. Gosh, 50, 40. Who knows?
I'll be right back.
You're fine. All right, Luke 23, 47.
Okay, so you can talk about it while I'm gone.
Yeah.
Okay.
No,
that's the best I can do for a second.
Make sure you mute. We don't want to hear anything. Chapter 23, verse 47. Now, when the centurion saw what was done, he glorified God, saying, certainly this was a righteous man. John Wayne. And all the people that came together to that sight, beholding the things which were done, smote their breasts and returned. All the people that saw that sight smote their breasts and returned. What does that mean, returned? They were at some place, the centurion saw it. John Wayne, the centurion, says, certainly this man was the Son of God. Oh, that was terrible. And all the people came together to that sight from somewhere, wherever they were, beholding the things which were done, smote their breasts and returned. What's this return? That's my question. So, verse 49, and all his acquaintance and the women that followed him from Galilee stood afar off, beholding these things. And behold, there was a man named Joseph, a counselor, and he was a good man and a just. The same had not consented to the counsel indeed of them. He was of Arimathea, a city of the Jews, who also himself waited for the kingdom of God. This man went into Pilate and begged the body of Jesus. And he took it down and wrapped it in linen, laid it in a sepulchre that was hewn in stone, wherein never man before was laid. Verse 55, chapter 23 of Luke. And that day was the preparation, and the Sabbath drew on. Singular Sabbath.
Which verse? What verse?
23:54. But I'm kind of looking at 48. These people that saw the sight smote their breasts and returned. That's a funny return to what? So that's kind of weird. But let's point out verse 54. That Sabbath that drew on after the preparation day is a singular Sabbath. Verse 5 and 55, and the women also which came with him from Galilee followed after and beheld the sepulchre and how his body was laid. So some women saw how he was laid, some saw where. But verse 56, these women that saw him, how his body was laid, they returned. What does that mean, they returned? It's almost a Sabbath. And they returned and prepared spices and ointments and rested the Sabbath day according to the commandment. So did they do the spices on the Sabbath and then rest the rest of that Sabbath? And that's kind of fine, I guess. You're doing it for a body. But what does it mean?
So where did they return to?
Right.
It seems like they went. So I would say something like, just off the top of my head, they went and saw Jesus while he was dead. And then they left him dead and went back home and got the spices that they had bought in some past time, maybe, or whatever, to prepare the spices that they're going to go back to anoint his body. And that's what we see happening early in the morning on Sunday. Amen. I guess that's the first thing. That's the first way I'd have to read it that way, obviously.
Oh, of course. Yeah. And I would just say they were there. They saw how his body was laid. They returned for what? The Sabbath or whatever. And then the next day after that, on the preparation day, they did the spices and stuff. Because look at the interlinear on verse 56, chapter 23, 56. Okay. Look at the interlinear. And they returned and prepared spices and rested the Sabbath day according to the commandment. This kind of like works in your favor also, but it literally says, and on the indeed Sabbath they rested, making it sound almost like specifically this is the weekly Sabbath. So I do like that in the Greek. Where is it at there? And on the indeed Sabbath. Wow, singular again, singular Sabbath. That sounds like on the weekly Sabbath there, 100% that they rested. But that works for you and that works for you and. But
it's Sabbaton there.
Excuse me. It does not work for you because it's a singular. Sorry. Go ahead.
I thought that was which one's the plural? Isn't that the plural one? It seems like they use them I would argue of course, seems like they use them. There isn't like that distinction.
Yeah, you see the S underneath there? NANS, that S means singular. That's why I'm saying we don't need to know what Sabaton is or whatever. They've already done it
Yeah,
for us. Noun, adjective, noun, singular.
right.
The, however.
Let's see, what is that? I think that's wrong. I think accusative neuter, noun,
Yeah,
accusative singular. Yeah.
yeah. All that stuff
I,
that
I
belongs
knew
to God.
B is separate. I knew that. Just so you know, I knew that.
No,
Just,
seriously, for your Daniel 9 studies, you have to know what your present participle, past tense, adjutant, whatever the heck.
well,
That's
I remember when Yahoo showed up in one of my things where I said I haven't seen him for like a year, and he pops in and makes a comment on my or I said, I don't think you have to get circumcised in the new covenant. Just saying, like that's just how I read the text. I don't think you have to do it.
he thought you did?
I think he thinks you're supposed to, it's like, do you have to, to be fair with everybody, I would say it's like someone, well, do you have to do anything? Like, do you have to stop murdering people? Do you have to stop lying to be saved? It's like, do you have to? What do you mean? Do you have to? Like, it's like the wrong question, right? So I
Do I
mean,
have to
I,
have a
I, I
party
think
with
the New
God?
Testament. I think the New Testament. I'm not saying like if you get circumcised it's bad, but I'm saying I don't think it's saying you ought to get circumcised. It seems like it's saying you don't have to get physically circumcised. It doesn't matter. Like it does. It's not saying like, you know what I mean. But it's an interesting sort of question. It's like I just don't think you have to get
No.
circumcised literally, right? But you do have to get your heart circumcised, or
Oh, he
you have
thought
to be.
that's the entire Deuteronomy is nothing but the circumcised heart.
Right.
The first blood covenant was not written in stone. You know my chronology. It was written on paper, on goat skin, and taken back up to God. And quite frankly, that tabernacle that he built after he delivered the covenant back to God, he remember God told him about it. He came down, wrote it down, sprinkled blood on the people in the parchment, took it back up there. There's no stone commands yet. That's the original was definitely of your heart. And Deuteronomy 10, 20, or 30, or all three of those, or something. Oh, circumcise the foreskin of your heart. You guys keep falling away. I don't know how
Oh yeah, I'm
Calvinists
with you
don't
there,
read it.
man. Yeah, this is what I try to argue with people that don't want to keep the don't want to obey the laws or whatever. It's like obviously we have a slightly different version of what that means, but um and I want to comment on this and get your comment on this comment, which is interesting. But yeah, it's like obviously God always wanted to circumcise their hearts. Like when he says like I want what does he say? I prefer mercy rather than sacrifice. He's like, or when they're like killing a bunch of extra animals, he's like, I don't want your stupid feast days. He's like, you can take your sacrifices and shove it. I want you to take care of the widows. Right? He always wanted to circumcise their hearts. He always wanted them to be converted. That's not that's not like it's not like this indifferent thing that God wants now in Jesus that was not possible before. This is like, dude, it's the same God, bro. Like the sacrifices were like temporary to deal with, to teach them something about God, but he always wanted them to just like be loving and like take care of the widow and like treat people as image bearers of God, right? Like that was
Oh
the
yeah.
idea. So
Look at any.
do you remember that guy who debated it like several years ago now? That guy Jim Staley, that Sabbath debate with Jim Staley. He debated this guy's mentioning Richard's mentioning Pastor Rose. Is that right? Is that the same guy? I think Roseboro. Anyways, they debated the Sabbath, and I thought Jim Staley won. He's a Hebrew roots guy. If you didn't see that, but he's saying Pastor Roseboro proved Jesus was crucified on Thursday because the sun stopped shining, and that counted as a day. I think that's an interesting approach. Where how because God, like there was a time of darkness, right? That God, like it was like a
3 hours, I think, right? 3 hours,
right.
1
Some
hour.
people when people are really strict on the whole 3 days and 3 nights, they'll try to use the supernatural darkness that God shielded the dead body of Jesus on the cross. They'll count that as an evening.
And the
To have
morning,
an
because it
evening,
came.
morning, to have the 3 days and 3 nights.
I told my
find that
daughter that when she was like 5. I go, honey, this is why.
well, if you count that, then the Wednesday thing would be way too many days. I already think it is too many days, to be honest, but that's one of my
Oh, I was
complaints
defending
with
the
it.
Friday crucifixion, the partial
Okay.
Friday, all the in the partial. I said, look, here's another day right here.
Right. Yeah. Right. I don't think. I mean, I think that's interesting idea. Let me just say my view about how this works.
You're all right. Go ahead, brother.
I think it seems like it's not enough time. Jesus died on Friday, like barely on Friday too, right? He died before the Sabbath drew on, is that I would say. And so on one little tiny second of this preparation day, Jesus was dead. So I would say that counts as Jesus was dead on the 24-hour period before the Sabbath started. So he was dead on the day before the Sabbath. And then Jesus, I would argue Jesus was dead for the full 24 hours of the Sabbath. And then it doesn't really tell us other than that sometime after the 24-hour period, that is the Sabbath day, 24 hours, sometime after the sun went down on Sabbath on Sabbath day, sometime after that, it doesn't really say when, before the sun came up on the day after the Sabbath, he rose from the dead, and it doesn't say when. And by the way, technically that could be on what we call Saturday. But biblically speaking, it would, on that rendering, so long as he rose from the dead after the sun went down on Saturday, he rose on that day. That's the 24-hour period after the 24-hour period of the Sabbath day, 24 hours was over. So he was dead for at least a second on the 24-hour period after the Sabbath. He died right before the 24-hour period of the Sabbath. So he was dead on 3 consecutive days. Now the Bible says he was to be dead for 3 days and 3 nights. Now, if you take that rigidly, that does not qualify. So I take it to mean something like it's using the language of kind of like Jonah, right? And if you're not as strict with the language, because there's other issues for me, like, okay, if he died on Wednesday and it tells you it's before the sun went down, right? You have more than 3 days and 3 night periods, even if he raised on Saturday day period. You still got one too many evenings in there. But I don't think you need to be that rigid. We can look at that if you want in a second. I'm almost done. And so I would just say, I just think it's saying, look, three different days. Jesus was to be dead on 3 different days, because it says he'd be dead for 3 days. It says he rose on the 3rd day. On the 3rd day. After the 3rd day, it says, right? Like, so the language just doesn't seem super strict. And if you try to be super strict, then you're going to have verses that are problematic if you're trying to be too much of a stickler about it. I think the easiest, in my opinion, and I want to look at this more closely, and I want to give you all due respect and diligence or whatever. I'm just saying, like, the way I don't have it all laid out really well in my head per se, but I have looked at the different things here, and it just seems like all the different languages that apply. It's like he died after the 3rd, like he was to raise on the 3rd day. How does that work? Or after 3 days, and then also 3 days and 3 nights. Like those, if you're rigid on all 3 of the ways it's said, you have problems. So I'm just saying, like, I don't think you have to be that rigid. The easy, happy medium is like, look, you do need to have him dead on 3 different 24-hour periods for sure. And it seems like that qualifies. And the last thing I'll say, this is just where I'm at with it.
You're all right, brother. Take your time.
I don't want to be disrespectful. I would say it's hard for me to imagine that nobody was like saying, hey, he didn't die on the first day after the Sabbath. Like, everybody understood from the earliest time that, according to prophecy, that he would raise on, that he wrote, like we say Sunday, right? But that gets kind of lost in translations. Like, they thought he rose on the day after the Sabbath. And the idea that not only do we see nobody historically say, actually, he rose on Saturday. And where you first really start hearing people say that is sort of like the Worldwide Church of God from like the last 100 years, from kind of a bad read, or imposing a reading on a couple of the verses we looked at, saying it like demands that you read it a certain way, when it actually, the scholarship doesn't say that unless you read it like really rigidly in the English version. And that was a guy named the guy from the Worldwide Church of God or whatever. And by the way, that church has abandoned now. If I recall, that church now has officially abandoned the Sabbath practice. The guy
Oh
who
my
started
God.
that church, who made that argument from his reading of the text. But think about that. His reading of the text, nobody made this argument in history. Like nobody in the early church was like, hey, he rose on Saturday. I mean, that's just hard to swallow. I'm not saying that's proof. It's just hard. It's kind of, it feels conspiratorial because like, surely there was faithful people like John, right? Like Jesus' brother would have been like, no, he rose on Saturday, right? Like, how did that get lost without anybody? Polycarp or, who was taught by John, and John lived to like 100 AD. How did nobody, like John would have known that? John would have told Polycarp. There'd be like, I mean, it would be quite a conspiracy. That's where I really struggle with that being realistic. Okay, I'm
Where
done.
do you
Sorry,
think?
that's where I'm at.
Oh, no, you're fine. It's you put in so many qualifiers in there trying not to offend me. I enjoy the feedback, the conversation. We're not. I'm kind of written in stone on this, but no, I want to find my errors and such. You don't gotta, you know. Well, I don't want to say,
I don't want to be
no,
rude. I just
no.
want to
You're
be
my.
honest.
Oh my goodness! I think we're both going to be walking in heaven arguing about this, just like my flat earther friends. We're going to be arguing about it as Jesus is patting us both on the back, saying, "Good job, well done, faithful servant." And we're still arguing about flat Earth. Well, I don't have it. It's the people that specifically teach against certain other things. This Sabbath death and this crucifixion and stuff to me just gives credence to the scriptures, such as if there is a difference of opinion, John said this and Mark said that, the scholars will simply say, well, they're different witnesses. They're not going to have the exact same witness report. True, I get that. But what I have found out is that you need to read all four of them at once to get a clear picture on what the heck's going on. And I mean all four, and trust them such that if one guy says, hey, it was this and one donkey and another guy says it was two donkeys, you're going to have to come to the conclusion that it was on two different days. You're not going to come to the conclusion that there was a contradiction in the Bible, that this guy thought there was only one donkey and this guy knew there was two donkeys. In fact, the one donkey has two witnesses. Matthew says two donkeys, and the way it's written, it can't be anything else but two donkeys. A mother and its colt. Put the coats on them. Put Jesus on them. But if you think there's one triumphal entry into Jerusalem, you're going to think he was jiggetting. That's horse trick riding. He's riding two donkeys at once. If you don't come to the conclusion, it's a riddle. Why does one guy say this and the other guy say that? It's a riddle that we need to find out. And that's the beauty of Torah. When you read the chronology of the Exodus, how he goes up to the mountain and comes down, goes back up, comes down, goes back up and comes down. If you just read it as, hey, this happened like in the movies, he went up there one time and got 623 laws and came down and put the stone tablets in a tabernacle that he hasn't even given instructions yet on how to build. Okay, it's ridiculous. If you don't
Well,
understand
you
the
got the oral
chronology,
Torah up there. I'm sure of that.
the
Just
oral
kidding.
Torah, yeah, really,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
we are anti-aura. Ooh, same with
just kidding.
tradition. Yeah, oh, that tradition. Jesus hated that tradition. But yeah, I think that's about all I had. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, the Acts thing in the Genesis, just to show the single Sabbaths versus the plural Sabbaths, and that should get us started. There's gonna under your version, they're gonna be on the weekly Sabbath going to Pilate to break his legs. In my version, they're going to have a preparation day where they can buy spices. They can go talk about putting a seal on the tomb, etc. It seems there's only one way it could have gone down to have a high Sabbath, a regular day, and then the regular weekly Sabbath. That seems the only way that it can go down to end my whatever you call it on. It had to be a Wednesday.
Okay. Yeah, well, I think we restated each argument as we went through them. So I'm going to review it again. I'm going to call all my, because we got to defend Ellen White. So no matter what, we're going to make it say what it's got to say. So
Now, this is what I would say to that. I start off with a question that anybody in any chat room, layman's, yours, mine, whatever chat room, doesn't John, what was it? I think 1945, when it says they had to get him off the cross for the Sabbath, for that Sabbath was a high Sabbath. That's how I start out with SDA. Hey, Dr. Jason, doesn't it say that since this was a high Sabbath, doesn't that exclude every weekly Sabbath? There's no reason to say it was a high Sabbath if it was just a weekly Sabbath. They had to get him off for the Sabbath. But they had to get him off because it was a high Sabbath. So I'm stuck on that word for they had to get him off because that was a Sabbath, a high Sabbath. That's how I start off with the SDA, and they say, and then you can just lead the conversation from there to try to find your own, your own chronology. But I just think it's beautiful, Jamie, and I just love it. It's so it fits so natural. The raised on the third day to us means the daytime, which means he had to have been buried. You have to start the count at night.
you don't think he was buried, do you?
At night?
I mean, Jesus, I don't think it says Jesus was, I mean, well, I don't want to interrupt you. Sorry.
No, I think he was buried, like everything. He could have been just dead at
I think
I
mean, I just mean like I told this to Chris Lucas a long time ago. I said, look, if you're going to be that stickler about that language, I don't think you can be, because if you are, then you have problems. If you try to be that, like, think it's that literal, like 3 days and 3 nights means 3 different days, because a day is an evening and a morning, right? Well, it says 3 evenings and 3 mornings. It's like, does it mean that though? Maybe, but not necessarily. I'm saying it's like when people try to, when you say it's necessarily, because it says 3 days and 3 nights. Here's my point. I'll make it quick. It's like, look, I get what you're saying, but when you're that literal, that's problematic, because you got him raising on the 3rd day, and then also after 3 days. And so you can't be that much of a stickler, because then one of those sayings you can't be a stickler on one of those sayings. And my only point was to add that reminded me of that, is to say, look, it says Jesus died and was buried and rose, again, like he wasn't ever buried. He was put in a tomb. Are we going to be sticklers about that too? That we have to have him under dirt? Like, no, it just means to say he was buried, he died and was buried, is to mean he truly died. And he was put into a tomb and or buried. But it doesn't have to be that he was put in the dirt. I believe he was put in the tomb. And the phrase "and was buried" just means he had a funeral service because he was truly dead, and he was put into the place where you put a dead body, which may or may not be buried in dirt. But I'm not going to be a stickler about that, right? Because we can't, because he's buried in the garden tomb, in my opinion, anyway. You know what I mean? That's all I'm saying. Sorry, go ahead. I blabbered.
No problem. No, that buried versus buried back then, that's how they did it for sure. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Only one of the scriptures says 3 days and 3 nights. One of the 4 gospels. The other one says, it's kind of vague, something like for 3 on the 3rd day or something. But yeah, you're absolutely right. It's very vague on, in fact, but what's beautiful about it is it's the one sign he told the Pharisees: I'm going to tear down this temple and raise it up on the 3rd day. And of course, we take that to mean daytime. But if any prophecy says that a guy is going to be dead 3 days and 3 nights, let's say it's the Old Testament and it specifically says 72 hours, 3 complete days and nights, you're going to have to nail that to the hour, to the minute. If you're dead on noon on one day, it's going to have to be, who knows, noon 72 hours later. So there's going to be a problem no matter what, if it says, if you are a stickler for literally 3 days 3 nights. So that's why Chris Lucas also looked up when a woman is he looked this up in the Talmud, the Mishnah, one of those. He said how a woman that needs to be 3 days before she's purified, they will not count a partial day. even if it's one, and in this Talmud that he read, even if it's a minute before sundown, so to speak, you do not, and they stop. You do not count that whole day. It must be a complete entire day.
Yeah, I
So I
know.
see what you're saying about, yeah, I see what you're saying about a Wednesday crucifixion. Hey, we've got Wednesday, and then Friday, Thursday night, Thursday day, Friday night, Friday day. Yeah, we've got like 4 days in there if you count these partial days. But
I
if he
don't know
was
how you get on
before,
the third day to make sense if you're trying to be such a stickler about language, right? That's kind of the point.
yeah, and he could have, and I think he was actually buried and such in the stone prior to the sun like being down, but he could have been dead before sundown and then later, because I don't know how long it takes to prepare a body. 100 pounds of ointment, oh my God. I mean, what, there's going to be a mess. It's and the tomb is close by, thank goodness. I'm just saying, so if he's dead before sundown Wednesday, and has to be risen in the daytime, because we are a stickler for that, and raised on the third day, raised on the third day time, he would have to be dead at night. And we do get an exact 72 hours if he's raised on the daytime of the Sabbath. Because as we read, we all agree the
And
ladies were there.
he's dying at sundown on the day he dies, which if, so you're
Yeah,
saying,
let's say an hour before sundown he dies. So an hour before sundown on the weekly Sabbath, he would have been raised. But quite frankly, he could have been raised Saturday early during the daytime. But if we read all the scriptures at once, we get a clear picture. The women were there on that day after the Sabbath, whether it was right after sundown, whether it was 3 o'clock in the morning and when it's yet still dark, or whether it was at sunrise when we're all having our ham, Sunday ham, Easter ham, whatever the heck. We all know it was definitely Sunday. We all know he was gone. He wasn't yawning and stretching and trying to come to life and saying, "Oh, get me a coffee. Where's my cigarettes?" He was gone. The stone had been rolled away. Well, actually, I think the two ladies did see the angel sitting on top. But
yeah, it was our,
regardless,
yeah. So I agree.
yeah,
So let me just say,
gone.
I agree
Yeah,
that when people try to say like some people try to make it so like, because they so don't get the biblical day thing. It's like they want to like try to say he's rose after the sun came up on Sunday. It's like, no, that's not true. He rose
yeah,
sometime before the sun. He was alive before the sun came up on the day break of the day. That's the 24-hour period after the Sabbath. And yes, all those little details that I just said are for clarification. That's necessary. Unfortunately, it's complicated, but because you got day, because we already went over it. The way
yeah.
days
He,
can be
he thought
used
he was
has
a
different
gardener
usage. A
in the
day is a
Sephardi.
24-hour period. A day is the day portion of the day, et cetera, et cetera. And so there's ambiguity in some of this.
Oh
So I
yeah,
like,
but
that's
if
why I like
it's
to look at verses and say, hey, look, that verse. So this is what I wanted to say is certainly
yeah.
the verses in John 20 and such don't give you much data other than that Jesus was already alive when the sun came up on the day, that's the day after the Sabbath, quote unquote Sunday.
Amen.
So he could have, that verse does not in any way, the ones that say on the first day of the week when the sun was rising, he was already risen. And so that's compatible. Is what it's not compatible with is Jesus rising during the daylight portion of the day after the Sabbath. Is what it's compatible with is Jesus being alive before the daylight portion on the day we call Sunday, which is the 24-hour period after the Sabbath. But that's
Amen.
compatible with either view
Amen.
by itself. People need to
Yeah.
be honest about what it says and what it doesn't actually say, what the text demands or doesn't demand, and what views are compatible with what the data says in that particular verse. And if we're not honest about that, we'll never get anywhere coming to agree on anything. So I'll give you the last word, Mike, before I close it down.
Oh,
So
you're
go
not going to
ahead.
let anybody else up here? All these people
No, I'm going
chomping
to
at the
start
bit
a
to
new
get up and
stream because I'm going to start a new stream on physicalism and the state of the dead with Stephen. So I'll give you the last word, my friend. Thank you for
no, no.
being
My
so
last word is thank
nice.
you.
I
My
mean, you're
last
not.
word is thank
Wait, one last thing.
you. Yeah.
You're not saved.
Who, me?
You're not saved. You didn't say the words right.
Oh, that's right. But I believed for an instant back in '88
That's right. You did honk for Jesus and believe OSES for a microsecond. So you're good. Never mind.
Yep,
Sorry.
I was
Go
in the
ahead.
gutter. I was drunk in the gutter, 4 o'clock in the morning. More booze on me than a liquor store sells. More booze in my bloodstream. What was it? A .298 blood alcohol content. Crying out to the Lord. I'm saved. I'm fine. I'll be fine. No, my last word is thank you so much, Jamie, for letting me present this. It has to be out there. I'm 63, and if I come to a nugget that I think is a nugget and don't share it, I feel it will be lost forever. So at least it's out there in cyberspace somewhere. Now let me trigger you with my final point. A Friday crucifixion versus a Wednesday crucifixion. Daniel, does Jesus die on the 5th day of the week or midweek, which is Wednesday? Sorry to trigger you, brother. Have a good night.
Nobody's gonna know. They're gonna know. How would they know? How would they know? How would they know? I can't. I can't know. They're gonna know. How would they know? Nobody's gonna know. They're gonna know. They're gonna know. They're gonna know. How would they know? They're gonna know.